So, with this chapter, we're going to start to get into some political transformation. Specifically, we're going to talk, or at least start to talk, about the building of empires. And we'll deal with it in this chapter quite a bit, and then we'll also build upon it again next chapter as well. And the time period here that we're looking for, and again, highlight what I highlight, and I'll point out where I want some of the additional notes to go to. But the time period that we're looking at here is 1450 to 1750. This is really an age of empire building. And within this period of time, we the Europeans building quite a number of very significant empires. The other thing with their empires, and you want to put this little note right here at the end of number one underneath capital B, you want to put down or just add to the sentence and put down and varied and varied. There's going to be a lot of differences within the European empires. You're going to see that each of the colonies are going to have a specific job, and that is going to be really the only thing that the Europeans are going to be interested in that particular location for, like you'll see with the sugar colonies, and then also with some of the colonies of North America, that they will serve a completely and totally different purpose. Other people are also going to be building an empire along with the Europeans. For example, we're going to have the Russians constructing a major empire, though their empire is going to be kind of unique, and all these empires actually are going to be vastly different from what the Europeans do. We're going to have a Qin dynasty that is going to actually double China's size. We have another dynasty or another empire being built in India where the Mughal Empire is going to pull together both Hindus and Muslims. And you'll see that there is going to be some successes and a lot of failures because of the difference between the two religions. It's going to really be an overwhelming work to try to get those two groups to agree with one another. And then also, finally, the Ottoman Empire is going to reestablish some of the older political unity of the Islamic heartland. And this is going to kind of be important for them moving forward because they definitely will take up the mantle of being the uniter of Islam. Now, there is something really quite unique with these last four empires. And in fact, I'm going to want you to put a note here that kind of goes with all four of them. And what you want to do here to start with is actually just draw like a carrot like that ties them together. And then the note I'm going to have you put right at the end of that carrot because a note kind of goes with all of these guys over here. Do you want to put down here, please, that the empire building of these countries are by expanding locally. The empire building of these countries are by expanding locally. Basically, what all of these guys are doing, whether it's the Russians, the Chinese, the Mughals, or the Ottomans, they're basically beating the crap out of their next door neighbors. The Europeans, on the other hand, are going to have to do something completely and totally different that will set them apart from everybody else here. So, to start off with the Europeans and the Americas, because this is going to be what you're going to be most familiar with, the European empires, of course, are going to be marked by maritime expansion. This means that they have to get their butts on a boat and they have to sail at a distance across oceans and seas in order for them to expand. One of the things that has gone on here for quite some time is during the Middle Ages and even before, these European countries figured out that if they want to expand, they're not going to be able to do so within Europe. They've spent a lot of time trying to beat the crap out of their neighbors, and they realize that that just simply isn't going to be overly successful, at least not long-term successful. So if they want to build an empire, they're going to have to go off Europe. And if they want to go off Europe, they're going to have some maritime or some naval technology that, we'll talk about a little bit later in order to do just that. Specifically, where are we going here? The Spaniards are going into the Caribbean and then onto the Aztec and Incan empires. The Portuguese are going to be in Brazil. And there's going to be a reason why they get left with Brazil. The British, French, and Dutch colonies are going to go into North America because at this point here, the British, French, and Dutch are kind of like a little bit like a second round. Like the Spanish and Portuguese are going to get on their boats right away, and they're going to have the first crack at the New World. And the British, French, and Dutch, in a weird way, are going to kind of get the leftovers. The irony is going to be that ultimately the leftovers are going to be more productive and more prosperous and more profitable than what the Spanish or the Portuguese are going to be able to get in the first round. So the Europeans have a couple advantages here that allow them to get into the Americas. And some of these are a little common sense, and some of them we've also kind of talked a little bit about before. The first one here is geography. The European Atlantic states were well positioned for involvement in the Americas. In other words, and you want to put this note here next to number one, because we do have some other things that kind of have to go with two and three just for a little bit of, space for you. Do you want to put down here, please, that they are closer to the Americas? They are closer to the Americas, and the winds and currents helped. And the winds and currents helped. There's actually naturally occurring winds and currents that will send ships, or that flow rather, back and forth between Europe and the Americas. And then also the fact that they are substantially closer because the Atlantic Ocean is substantially smaller than the Pacific Ocean allows them a nice little advantage that will set them to the Americas. The other thing here is need. The Chinese and Indians had such rich markets in the Indian Ocean that there wasn't much incentive to go beyond. I mean, they had everything that they wanted or thought that they wanted pretty much at their doorstep. So why go beyond the doorstep and deal with all the cost and all the risk of going beyond the doorstep when you don't have to? The other issue here is going to be marginality. The Europeans were aware of their marginal position in Eurasian commerce and they wanted to change it. The Europeans understand that they're like the younger sibling of what's going on within China and India and also within the Ottoman Empire, like with the Middle East. And they want to change that position. They know that they have to do something to catch up. And what they're hoping to do is discover something or find some way to get something that the Chinese and all these other traders that they're purchasing from will want to. So we can have kind of a better give and take of trade. Because at this point, the Europeans are buying a lot of goods coming from the East, but the people in the East aren't buying a lot of goods from the Europeans. Now, there is something kind of unique about these two advantages or two instances. So you want to put a little star here by number two and put a little star there by number three. And then go ahead and again, put another caret that connects them, like that. And then you want to put down as your note, again, you're going to put it right here, just like you did with the last one. Do you want to put, please, that we haven't dealt with these motivations / ideas before. We haven't dealt with these motivations / ideas before. A lot of these others we've touched on in an earlier chapter, in the earlier chapter, but these two we definitely haven't really talked about. Other things that are going to be motivating here, obviously, is rivalry. We have interstate rivalry driving rulers to compete. Again, there's this constant desire for the European countries to be better than their next door neighbor. And if they can discover a new world and sort of kind of rape and pillage and take advantage of that new world, and their neighbors don't have that same experience, well, then they're just going to have things that their neighbor just doesn't have. They're going to have wealth. They're going to have land, which is a big deal because, like I told you guys before, land equals power and land equals wealth. So the more you have of it, the better off you are. Another motivation here are going to be merchants. A growing merchant class wanted direct access to Asian wealth. And this is something that we'll get into a little bit later on. But just in a nutshell, what's happening in the East is that there is a monopoly on trade with Muslim traders and also Venetian traders. These are traders that come from the Italian state of Venice. And if they have a monopoly on trade and they're the only ones that you can trade with in order to get this cool stuff that's coming from the East, those Venetian, those Muslim traders are going to charge whatever it is that they want to charge. And you're going to pay it because you want those cool things coming from the East. Well, these merchants here are going to want to try to find a way to go around those Muslim traders and those Venetian traders to kind of get direct access to the cool stuff that everybody wants coming out of Asia. The other thing, or another issue here, is going to be wealth and status. Colonies were an opportunity for impoverished nobles and also commoners. It's going to be an area of economic opportunity. And we'll kind of see off and on that the economic opportunity in Europe is few and far between or is really expensive to buy into because there's a lot of risk in investing in the colonies and there's a lot of opportunity. You can make, if you're successful, you can make a lot of cold hard cash really, really quickly. Okay, granted, there's a ton of risk involved, but you're able to get potentially more bang for your dollar. And the last one here is, and we will have some notes that have to go with some of the stuff underneath number 7, it's going to be religion. One, there's a massive crusading zeal going on here, and this is not anything new. This is just sort of kind of a continuation from what we saw in, or what was going on in an earlier era. So what's going on here? I just want to put this note right here. It's a little bit of a bigger note. So you may see that you have to, fill in here and maybe, down the margin. But you want to put down here next to A, underneath number 7, is that there is a need for more Christians. There is a need for more Christians. And after the Reformation, the Roman Catholic Church saw this as a way to win the numbers war against the Protestants. So I'll say that whole thing one more time. There is a need for more Christians. After the Reformation, the Roman Catholic Church saw this as a way to win the numbers war against the Protestants. So the crusading zeal initially is going to be that the Europeans want more Christians so they can do battle against the ever encroaching Muslims, especially because this is a time period when the Ottoman Empire is doing a lot of expansion. But by the time we get to the early 16th century, the early 1500s, we're in the middle of the Protestant Reformation. And the way that the Roman Catholic Church thinks that they can end this Reformation and get rid of the Protestants once and for all is just simply by having more Catholics. So it's going to be one of the many reasons why the Spanish and the Portuguese, as soon as they go someplace, whether it's the New World or any other place for that matter, they're going to start converting people to Catholicism because they need more Christians to do battle against the Muslims. And eventually they need more Catholics to kind of get out from under the Protestants in the Protestant Reformation. One of the issues here is also going to be that rivalries within the Americas provided allies for European invaders. And this is going to be something that the Europeans do quite often. In fact, you want to put down here next to number 9, just put down that the idea of divide and conquer will be popular for the colonizers. The idea of divide and conquer will be popular for the colonizers. They're going to use it during this period of colonization from 1450 to about 1750, and then they're going to use it again during the second age of new imperialism that's going to start in the 19th century. They're just simply going to befriend some people and then use them to conquer others and then turn around and conquer the people that they befriended. Or they're going to take a population, they're going to divide it up into little groups and just sort of kind of, rather than conquering the whole group, they conquer these little tiny groups as they go. It ends up being amazingly effective. There's a couple other things I want to touch on that are going to be really important during this age of discovery. And we'll touch upon it, again in a couple videos, PowerPoint, that type of stuff. And the first two here is the Great Dying and the Little Ice Age. So the Great Dying is just a demographic collapse of Native American societies. Just to give you an idea of what's going on, is pre-Columbian Western Hemisphere had a population of perhaps 60 to 80 million. Pre-Columbian means before Columbus showed up. So before Columbus showed up, the Western Hemisphere, and this is meaning North and South America, had a population of anywhere between 60 to 80 million people. The problem here is that they have no immunity to old world diseases. And the reason for this, and the little note that you want to put down here next to number 3, is because they had no large farm animals. Because they had no large farm animals. What the Europeans do is that they bring with them diseases that have mutated over the centuries, and you'll see this a little bit later, have mutated over the centuries from being livestock-based diseases, think, chicken pox, there's a reason why it's called chicken pox, to becoming human diseases. And if an area doesn't have these large scale animals, they're not going to have the diseases. And if they don't have the diseases, they don't have the immunities to the diseases. So the Europeans are waltzing right in, granted with far superior military technology, but they're also having these diseases that kill an absolutely huge percentage of the people. With the Europeans, these guys are going to bring not only European but also African diseases. The mortality rate is going to be up to 90% of the Native American population. So this 60 to 80 million is going to go down by 90%. You'll actually have some of the Caribbean islands where the mortality rate will actually be 100%. This really is going to be the conqueror of the New World, of the Western Hemisphere, not the awesomeness or what they claim to be the awesomeness of European military standards. No, it's the diseases that do everybody in. I mean, as a consequence of this, we have the Native American population of the Caribbean nearly vanishing. Central Mexico, which is where we're largely looking at the Aztec Empire, and the surrounding empires, dropped from between 10 to 20 million before Columbus showed up to around a million by 1650. And we have a similar thing occurring within North America when the British, French, and Dutch get in there as well. Another big outcome here of the Age of Discovery is going to be the Columbian Exchange. And you want to put a little note here only because this is oftentimes overlooked, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with this. So you want to put down here next to capital D, put down that this is a two-way exchange. This is a two-way exchange. I mean, it will be clear that definitely the Europeans have the better of the exchange, where they're taking things that they find valuable from the places that they conquer, but the indigenous population of the Americas are also getting some things from the Europeans. Maybe not necessarily the greatest of things, but they are getting some items, especially agricultural items, that were not indigenous to the Americas, that the Europeans are bringing from Europe and also from Africa. Part of this Columbian exchange is going to mean a massive native mortality, which is going to create a labor shortage for the Americas. And this is going to mean that we have to bring new people in. And specifically, who we're bringing in are migrant Europeans and African slaves. And this is going to create an entirely new society. And you'll see this in this chapter and also the next chapter as well. Other things that are also being exchanged are American food crops like corn, potatoes, cassava are going to spread widely in the Eastern Hemisphere, meaning Europe, the Middle East, that part of the world. We also, and this is going to be huge moving forward, there's also an exchange with the Americas that is going to reshape the world economy, especially the silver mines of Mexico and Peru that we'll deal with later. I mean, this is going to be absolutely huge for the trade that's going weirdly enough with China. But probably the biggest impact and one of the worst aspects of this age of discovery, of course, is going to be the importation of millions of African slaves to the Americas. And we'll get why the Africans are brought in a later section. There are a couple clear-cut reasons for the abuse that the Europeans reap upon the African continent. Ultimately, here, what the Columbian Exchange is a network of communication, migration, trade, and the transfer of plants, animals, and also microbes, because we're going to pass on germs, which is going to be called the Columbian Exchange. Um, Again, don't forget that the Europeans are going to get most of the rewards, but long term, and you want to put this down somewhere around six, give or take a little bit. It's kind of like a general note that goes with this. Do you want to put, please, here that crops from Europe came and transformed the landscape? Crops from Europe came and transformed the landscape and made possible a recognizably European diet and way of life. And this is going to be something that we'll mention in a future section, in a future chapter, because this is going to have a lot of fallout because of it.